After making modifications to my trailer so I could mount a wind turbine to it, I set off on my first test in the wilderness. But let me first explain what it took to get to that point. It's time for part 2 of making Wind Your Friend, putting a wind turbine on a trailer. And as you can imagine, putting a wind turbine on something that is moving, and in my case, something that has to be folded down and put up every time, is a challenge. And let's be realistic, that's not what these little wind turbines are meant for. They're meant for use in a house, on a roof, in a field, up a very tall pole and stuff like that. They're meant to be there permanently, whereas I need something that's only up temporary, and that's where the challenges start. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to go through the steps that it took for me to get a wind turbine on my trailer. And there's about 10 steps to that. The first one I'd already mentioned, and it's the just putting the blades on the turbine. Simple instructions, whatever type of turbine you use, it shouldn't be very complicated to do. But the next step is I've got to get the flange onto the pole. It has to sit up at the top of the pole. And in order to do that, I know some actually have a flange with clamps on it. Mine didn't because, I bought a very low-end turbine to start with. So I've got to come up with a means of securing it onto the pole or the post, whatever you want to call it. And also, the next step is you have to determine, well, what kind of post, what material, what diameter, what height. There's a lot of choices, and I'm going to go through what I came up with at least. Then the post has to be secured. The base has to be secured. It can't be, you've got a lot of weight up top, you got to make sure it's secured below. After you do that, it's probably not going to be standing on its own unless you got a really thick post and you got a cement base, which you're not going to have in a trailer. So there's got to be a way of tethering or securing the post midway so that it's not rattling about or twisting. I'll go into that. Then we get into the wiring. The motor's here, the wires have to go through the post and into the trailer. Now, it's ideal to have it in the post. Your priorities, you don't want your wires to get wet or flopping around and all that. But you also have to have a means of disconnecting it and connecting it because you're going to be taking it down all the time as you're traveling. Also, the wiring has to go into the trailer somehow. And a lot of people don't want to start drilling holes in the trailer. So I've got to find a way of attaching it so the wires are going inside. When they are inside, they have to go to the controller. Find a place for the controller that's convenient, wire to the controller, and then from the controller, the power has to go to the battery. So there's a lot of steps, and the 10th one is just the whole, well, how can you do all this setup and take down and storage in a short period of time? Because if you can't, then it's going to be a pain in the butt. So yes, there's challenges, but let me start going through the step by step, and I'll show you how I did it. Well, I think I now have enough to attach the pole and the turbine to my trailer. And here's what I've come up with so far. I've got 2 steel extension poles, go out to about 6.5 feet. I've got just a little piece of 2x4, about 2 feet long, plastic piece just as a spacer, and an old piece of 3/4 inch plywood I'm going to use just as an experiment for now. I've got 2 10-inch mending plates and a 6-inch mending plate. I have about a 9 1/4 inch angled bracket. I've got 2 1 1/4 inch muffler clamps. I've got a pipe nipple about 1 1/4 inch and a floor flange. A hot floor flange. It's been out in the sun. Lots of hex bolts, nuts, washers, stuff like that. And 2 4.5 inch wide U-bolts. And a big monster 10-inch strap hinge. I think that's enough to get me started, see if this works, and if I have to modify it as I go, I will. Well, as far as attaching the turbine to the trailer, I'm sure there's a lot of ways of doing it, but I looked into the way other people did it, and they just didn't appeal to me. Some suggest, well, not having it near the trailer at all, having it out in a field somewhere, all tethered up with cables, and it's like, no, that's not going to work. That's too much of a hassle, and it's too intrusive on the environment. It has to be part of the trailer. And this is what I came up with. Now you saw when I had everything spread out there, this is that 3/4 inch piece of plywood here, and it's mounted on the bumper by these 2 U-bolts, and in behind is the 2x4 and a little spacer, and it's mounted onto this piece right here, and it also sits on the bumper as well. And up here you've got this strap hinge, the 10-inch strap hinge, and the mounting bracket, the pipe flange, and the pipe nipple. So this is basically the entire assembly, and I just put a piece of pipe in there. There's not enough space here right now for me to fully show it. I'll show it to you when I'm out actually camping, but let me show you how it works. Is you loosen this nut right here, and that brings that down, and that brings that down. So now you've got everything horizontal. So imagine this a turbine with on an 8 or a 10-foot pole, and you bring it in from the side, bring it like that, and one hand should bring it up, the other hand locks it in place. So it's up. Now it's not completely secure, that's just the starting step, because the next is putting up the supports for the pole, and that's the next step. As far as this goes, it's still an experiment. That's why it's a little grungy right now. In reality, instead of having all the weight in the bumper, I'd rather it be supported by the trailer itself. So I would support this right directly on the side. But for testing stages, this is good enough for now.
The next part was a turning point on this project. I did some preliminary tests of the turbine up the pole to see how stable the support was. But something wasn't right. Despite several days of varying wind conditions, the turbine was not turning. Even a moderate windstorm, which bent the tree branches, the turbine did not perform. Seeing that I had just purchased it, I had to make a decision as to what my options were. I took the turbine down and rechecked it. The shaft did not appear to be moving freely, like something was binding.
Well, if you look over my shoulder, you'll see the wind turbine up on the trailer. And I've had it there for a few days in moderate wind, no wind, and even heavy wind. And guess what? It's really not doing anything at all. It hardly turns. And that's really odd, because I've seen wind turbines the exact same kind spinning away on RVs. I've got documented footage of that I took myself, so I know they can work. But this one is not, and it's up about 12 feet off the ground, which should be adequate for at least some motion, but very, very little. At high winds, it was just going around like that. So you might have noted what I said on the first of the videos, that I bought it off Amazon, but it was not a purchase that was fulfilled by Amazon. It was a third party. And yes, I was expecting I'd have a little bit of a hassle if something was wrong with it and I had to return it. Well, the good news is I was completely wrong, because I told the distributor the problem, that it's just not working, and instantly he said, I'd gladly send you a new one. No questions asked. He just wanted to make sure, he wanted me to send him a picture of the box, which I did. But before he did that, I asked him the question, well, this is how I'm using it. Is this the right turbine for me, or should I be trying something else? And he actually recommended something else, and he sent it to me. It is another grand reopening of a box, because I got, within 2 days, I got a new box. So let's open her up, if I don't kill myself with this knife. You know, it's good when people, you know, sort of live up to their customer service. And I believe so, that this guy really meant, oh, this is a big box. And here we go. It's a little heavier. I'm gonna have to, whoa, I have to put this down. But what I've got here, if I figure out how to unwrap it, well, I'm just gonna do it that way, is the paddle type. Happy face, if it works. These are supposed to work at lower wind speeds. And now if I can get that actually working, I compare them. If not, I'm going to put this up instead. So I've got the blades. I've got the instructions in Chinese if I want, but I think I'll try the English. What else do we got? Bolts, of course. And the turbine. And I seem to have, oh, lost the knife. Let's have a look here. Little Allen key on the top. Whoa. The spare flange. Whoa. And the turbine. Actually, just feeling that, it seems to spin a lot freer than the other one with the 3 blades. So I'm optimistic this is going to work, but I won't know until I set it up.
I know I missed a step, so let's go back to step 2, flange adapter. It's a 6" by 1 1/4" pipe nipple, a 1 1/2 to 1 1/4 reducing coupler, and a 1 1/2" pipe flange. A hole drilled into the coupler accepts the wiring. The electrical components are all connectors and wire. In hindsight, using wire from an outdoor extension cord would have been far more practical than buying 2 rolls of double wire, which is what I did. I'm also using Anderson connectors, which are a little pricey, but great for a good waterproof connection. After stripping the ends off the turbine wires, I added female isolation connects just to eliminate wires shorting out on the metal pipe. The male ends went on the Anderson connect, and once in place, I crimped the ends. Once the wires were stuffed down the turbine cavity, I lined up the 2 mounting flanges. Incidentally, I had to enlarge the pipe flange holes to fit the turbine flange bolts. A little tightening of nuts and bolts, and the flange and top assembly was complete. I used about 20 feet of wire for the outside cable. The controller included with the turbine was pretty simple. It had 3 wires going in from the turbine, plus positive and negative wires going out to the battery. There will be more steps later in the video, but at this point I had enough built for a field test. So the key reason why I chose this location was that valley. The wind's coming in that direction, and it should funnel through the valley so I have optimum wind. There's not a lot of wind right now, but in this area
it's probably the best I can do. Now, one of the big priorities for the whole wind turbine thing is that I had to be able to store it because I don't have a lot of space. So let me show you how I stored it. Here are the blades right here, wrapped up in plastic on the tongue. And the poles are on the bumper, strapped, wrapped in a tarp. Doesn't take up any space at all. So the only other thing that needed to be stored was the turbine. I'm sure I could store it outside, but I don't need to. Doesn't take up much space.
I used my sleeping bag cover to store the turbine. The top plate was secured with an elastic band, and the nuts and bolts were kept in a sandwich bag and tucked into the pipe for safekeeping.
So let me explain a little bit about the post itself. The middle part is a rail from a fence post. It's 1 3/8 inch diameter. It comes in 10-foot lengths, but I've cut it down just to the size of the back of the trailer. But I've also made so that I can extend it if I need to. These things in blue are the broom handles, the extendable broom handles, and they are hinged. I'll show you there. See, they move back and forth.
They are hinged to the bolts of a pair of muffler clamps, which secure them to the pole.
And what I just dropped is my little pole, which is just a post with a hook on the end, which just props things up when I'm setting up. And because it's on the hinge there, it should stay reasonably, as long as I've got it balanced, it should be okay, because the next step I have to put on the turbine. Now the blades go on with these machine screws, which take an Allen key. And there's actually quite a lot of them. So what I'm going to do is, instead of using that little Allen key, I made a drill bit out of one, which should save a little bit of time, because setup has to be a reasonable amount of time, or you're going to spend all your time setting it up. And then I just finish off with the handle Allen key.
To save everybody from falling asleep, I speeded the blade install up.
Now I have to admit, that is a little bit awkward, but it's only my first time out in the woods with it, so hopefully practice I can find ways of reducing the setup time. But anyway, it's on, I think I have all the pedals going the right direction. Looks that way. So before I put it up, I just have to attach the cord. And it's ready to go up.
The left brace has a rope snap on the end, which quickly secures one side. The right brace is attached with a threaded rod that fits into the hole in an angle bracket. Broom handles have a coarse Acme thread, however I discovered an EMT set screw connector fits right over the end. Attach and tighten the lock ring with pliers, and one side is secured. Now back to the left side. The bracket attaches to an eyebolt mounted on a mending plate bent into a U shape and secured to the roof with rivets. The quick connect is secured by using a bolt with washers and a nut. This keeps it from jiggling in the wind.
She's up.
The next step was the wire connect. Although I originally intended to put the wire inside the pole, I realized that this might make it difficult if I decided to extend the length of the pole. So I instead opted to leave it outside and just threaded it through the side mount. To get the wire into the trailer without drilling a hole, I found the perfect solution. I had removed my water tank, which gave me an inlet for the wire. I merely fit another Anderson connector in the hole vacated by the hose. No drilling or gluing necessary. The added bonus is once the connects are tucked into the inside, I can leave the wire going out the hose hole and lock the door back in place, leaving the wire ends safe and dry.
Well, there it is. Not a lot of wind now, but hopefully it'll get a little windier.
So my choice of where to put the controller, for now at least, is on the side of the kitchen counter. And one of the reasons I put it there is because the inlet is just behind here from the turbine, but as far as the storage and the battery, I have it right now at least underneath. Let me show you. See, there's a deep cycle battery. That's the one that I had in the front. And just as a temporary basis, I'm putting it back here. It's not vented, but I don't really think it's going to be charging that much anyway. It's going to be more of a trickle charge, so I'm not too concerned about that now. But this is enough for a test. But I think ultimately what I'd like to do with the wind turbine is have it charge my lithium battery. I bought a little anemometer to gauge how much wind I actually had. Although not very accurate unless you're reading right by the turbine, it did give me a general idea and showed how rapidly the wind speed fluctuated. The fastest speed I got here was 12.2 miles per hour. When I arrived, it was sunny with a mild wind, but by the next morning, conditions had changed.
Well, this is kind of a condition I've been used to lately. Rain, a little bit of wind, and not a lot of sun. And this is the condition I'm hoping that the wind turbine will be an advantage. Now, as far as why I put it in the back, let me explain a few things. A lot of people, or at least some people, may have preferred the front. And the reason I'm not using the front is because that's where my solar panels are. So I don't want anything to cast a shadow on my solar panels, so that wasn't an option. Others have thought, why not put it right at the peak? Put a pole, attach it to the side, and put it up there. That's a good idea. That gets it up higher and it gives it the stability, and I could certainly hinge at the bottom. But the problem is, how do you attach it to the top without a ladder? That's 10 feet high, and I don't think I'd want to risk some kind of automated thing that just clicked in place, so I didn't use that as an option either. In reality, there really only was one option, and that's the back. It's easy to access, it's easy to lift up, and it's an integral part of the trailer. I was not going to have a stand that was like underneath the wheel, which I've seen some people do it. I don't see the logic of that, because what if you set up and you find out the wind is better 200 feet away? That means you've got to set everything down and then drive over and set it up again, whereas all I have to do is put the stabilizers up and I can go anywhere. Now, I'm not going to go down the highway with that. That would be a dumb idea. But if I had to go, you say, a mile down a trail, I could leave it up. It could spin a little, but it wouldn't have any issues with the trailer or damage the turbine at all. And the other reason I like it at the back is it's the farthest away from where I sleep, which is here. So my logic is it's going to be less noisy, and if for some reason, let's say lightning strikes it and it falls down, I'm in the opposite end. I feel a lot safer that it's over there.
With no wind, the field test was over, but I did want to find out how long it took to take the whole thing down. Speeding up the camera but using a timestamp, here's the actual takedown by the second. My goal was to have everything taken down, packed, and put in storage within 15 minutes.
All done.
Not bad for a first try.
Well, as you can see, there's not a lot of wind. There hasn't really been a lot of wind for the last 2 days, so I think it's going to take a lot more camping and traveling to different locations to really give it a proper assessment of how well a wind turbine can do on a small trailer like my own. So as far as efficiency, well, the answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind.
Now, I'm pretty sure I'm going to find some decent wind as I travel, so please check back with me in a few weeks' time. Well, I sure hope you enjoyed this video and continue to follow me on my adventures and ideas.